Alan Murphy stepped off the transport ship and onto the hard, metallic surface of HFY. The air was thicker than Earth's, with a strange sweetness that reminded him of overripe fruit. As Earth's chosen diplomat, he straightened his blue uniform and took a deep breath. This mission could change everything. The Vortigax delegation waited at the end of the landing platform. Their tall, insect-like bodies stood perfectly still, their 4 arms held in formal positions. Their outer shells gleamed under the planet's 3 suns. "Ambassador Murphy," said the lead Vortigax, its mouth parts clicking between words. "I am first speaker KZZT. Welcome to our homeworld." Alan nodded politely. "Thank you for your hospitality, first speaker. I bring greetings from Earth and the United Systems." The Vortigax made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your journey was long. For such short-lived beings as humans, that must have been difficult." Alan kept his face neutral. This was the first insult, carefully wrapped in polite words. The Vortigax lived for hundreds of years and looked down on humans for their shorter lives. It was one of many things he hoped to change with these talks. "We find ways to make good use of our time," Alan replied with a small smile. The first speaker's compound eyes reflected the sunlight. "Indeed. Come, we have prepared quarters for you and your staff." Alan and his small team followed the Vortigax into a tall building made of something like glass and metal mixed together. Inside, everything was built for creatures larger than humans, with high ceilings and wide doorways. "The peace talks will begin tomorrow," said KZZT. "Rest well, Ambassador." When the Vortigax left, Alan turned to his assistant, Ben Miller. "What do you think?" Alan asked. Ben shrugged. "They're being polite, at least. But I heard some of the guards talking. Many Vortigax don't want peace with humans. They think we're beneath them." "Then we'll just have to change their minds," Alan said. That night, Alan reviewed his notes. The Vortigax hegemony controlled 12 star systems. They had fought 3 small wars with human colonies over the past decade. Neither side could gain a clear advantage. The Vortigax had better ships, but humans were more creative in battle. It was time to end the fighting. Morning came quickly on HFY. The 3 suns rose one after another, filling the sky with orange light. Alan dressed in his best diplomatic uniform and headed to the meeting hall with his team. The hall was enormous, with a round table in the center. 20 Vortigax representatives sat on one side. Some wore military decorations, while others had the plain shells of scientists or leaders. "Ambassador Murphy," first speaker KZZT began. "Please share why Earth seeks peace now, after years of conflict." Alan activated his presentation. A hologram appeared above the table, showing both human and Vortigax space. "Our species have more to gain as friends than as enemies," Alan said. "Humans have advanced medicine that could benefit the Vortigax. Your people have engineering skills we admire. Together, we could build something greater than either of us could alone." A Vortigax with military markings clicked loudly. "You speak of sharing technology? Why would we need human advances? Your lives are so brief. What could you possibly know that we don't?" Alan had expected this. "Perhaps because our lives are shorter, we work harder to solve problems quickly. Our medical technology has doubled human lifespan in just 2 centuries. We could help each other." The military Vortigax, whose name tag identified him as Commander Vrax, stood up suddenly. "This is outrageous. The human suggests we need their help to live longer. Our natural superiority is being questioned." First speaker KZZT raised a limb. "Commander, control yourself. We are here to listen." But Alan could see several Vortigax nodding in agreement with Vrax. The room felt tense. He decided to change approach. "Perhaps we could start smaller," Alan suggested. "Simple trade agreements. Cultural exchanges. Build trust first. The talks continued for hours. By the end, Alan felt they had made small progress. A few Vortigax seemed interested in his ideas, especially the scientists. But Commander Vrax and his supporters remained hostile. That evening, a formal dinner was held in the Grand Hall. Alan wore his ceremonial sash and tried to mingle with the Vortigax officials. He noticed Vrax and several others watching him from across the room, their posture rigid with anger. A young Vortigax scientist approached Alan. "Ambassador, I found your ideas about medical exchange fascinating. My research team would be interested in learning more." Alan smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. Earth would be happy to—" A loud crash interrupted him as Commander Vrax approached. "Scientist Zix, you dishonor yourself by speaking with this human about sharing our research facilities." "Commander," Zix protested, "I was only—" "Silence!" Vrax turned to Alan. "You come here with your clever words, trying to steal our knowledge, infiltrate our society. The hegemony has thrived for 10,000 years without humans." Alan kept his voice calm. "Commander, we seek partnership, not lies." Vrax's voice rose, drawing attention from around the room. "Humans cannot be trusted. Your kind says one thing while planning another." First Speaker KZZ hurried over. "Commander, this behavior is unacceptable." But Vrax wasn't listening. Alan saw something in the commander's upper right hand, a small device glowing with energy. "You will not corrupt our people with your human ways." Vrax hissed out. Everything happened very fast. Vrax raised the device. Security guards moved forward. Alan tried to step back. There was a flash of blue light. Alan felt a burning sensation in his chest. He looked down to see a smoldering hole in his uniform. The pain hit him a moment later, and his legs gave way. He collapsed to the floor as shouts and chaos erupted around him. As his vision blurred, Alan saw something strange. A figure was forming in the room, like a shadow-gathering substance. It wore what looked like an old-fashioned human cloak with a hood, and it moved toward him with purpose. The Vortigax security team had tackled Vrax, but 3 other Vortigax, clearly part of the same plot, drew weapons. They fired not at other Vortigax, but at the hooded figure approaching Alan. Their energy beams passed through the figure without effect. The being turned slowly toward the attackers. As it did, its hood shifted, revealing a face. It looked ancient, and somehow familiar, with eyes that contained what looked like stars and galaxies. The figure reached down and touched Alan's forehead with a pale hand. Alan felt a strange peace wash over him, despite the pain. The figure straightened and faced the Vortigax attackers. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You have broken the covenant," it said in perfect, unaccented language the Vortigax somehow understood. "You have attacked one under my protection, and then attacked me directly. This cannot stand." The last thing Alan saw before losing consciousness was the hooded figure growing larger, darkness spreading from it like wings. As the Vortigax attackers backed away in terror, on the United Earth ship Vanguard, 3 light-years away, Commander Laura West received an urgent transmission from HFY. The peace talks had failed in the worst possible way. An ambassador had been attacked, and something ancient and powerful had been awakened. Commander Laura West stared at the emergency transmission from HFY. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform bore the marks of someone who had been on duty too long. The message played again on the main screen of the U.E.'s Vanguard's bridge. "Attack on Ambassador Murphy. Unknown entity manifested. Request immediate assistance." The Vortigax transmission cut in and out, filled with static and panic. "Get me Earth Command," Lavra ordered, her voice steady. Despite the chaos unfolding, Within minutes, the stern face of Admiral Paul Garcia appeared on screen. "Commander West, I assume you've received the same reports we have." "Yes, sir." "Permission to take the Vanguard to HFY? The Admiral's expression darkened. "Granted, but there's more you need to know. This situation is now classified Level Black." Laura felt a chill. Level Black meant information so secret that most government officials didn't even know it existed. "Stand by for secure transmission," the Admiral said. When the new file appeared, Lara dismissed her bridge crew. Whatever this was, it was for her eyes only. She opened the file and began to read. The document was titled The Reaper Protocol, Humanity's Oldest Alliance. As she read, Laura's hands began to shake. According to the file, humans had evolved alongside an entity that ancient cultures called the Grim Reaper, the Angel of Death, Anubis, and many other names. This being wasn't a myth, but a real cosmic force that collected human souls when they died. For reasons unknown, Death had formed a special bond with humanity, guiding their souls safely to whatever came next, and protecting them from other cosmic entities that would consume those souls. This arrangement had existed for all of human history. It was why humans had spread so successfully through the galaxy, despite their relatively short lives. Death itself was their silent guardian. And now, on HFY, the Vortigax had not only attacked a human diplomat, but had directly fired upon Death when it came to collect Ambassador Murphy's soul. Laura closed the file and sat in silence. It seemed impossible, and yet it explained so much about humanity's resilience. The ship's AI interrupted her thoughts. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission from HFY." "Put it through," Lara said, about the face of Ben Miller, Ambassador. Murphy's assistant appeared. He looked shaken but alive. "Commander West, the situation here is ... He paused, searching for words. "It's beyond anything I've seen. Ambassador Murphy was attacked, but he's somehow still alive. The Vortigax, who attacked him, are experiencing some kind of life drain. Their bodies are aging rapidly." "What about the entity that appeared?" Lavra asked carefully. Ben's eyes widened. "You know about that? It appeared when the ambassador was shot, touched him, and then, when the Vortigax fired on it, it changed, grew larger. It's gone now, but strange things are happening all over the planet. People near death are seeing hooded figures. The Vortigax are terrified." "We'll be there in 6 hours," Lavra assured him. "Keep the ambassador safe." After ending the transmission, Lavra opened a secure channel to Earth. "Admiral Garcia, I've read the file. Request permission to bring Director Hayes aboard at our next jump point." The Admiral nodded gravely. "Already arranged. He'll be waiting for you." 5 hours later, the Vanguard stopped at a small space station to pick up its new passenger. John Hayes was a tall, thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. His title was Director of Xenodiplomacy, but according to the classified file, his real job was much stranger. "Director Hayes," Lavra greeted him in the ship's conference room. "I understand you have expertise in this situation." Hayes smiled sadly. "You could say that. My family has served as liaisons to death for 15 generations. We're the ones who can speak to it when necessary." "Is that even possible?" Lavra asked. "Death isn't what most people think," Hayes explained. "It's not evil or malicious. It's a cosmic force with a job to do. And for some reason, it's always had a special relationship with humans. We're the only species it communicates with directly. And now the Vortigax have angered it," Lavra said. Hayes nodded. "They've done worse than anger it. They've broken a covenant that has existed since the first humans. Death will respond." On HFY, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Lavra, Hayes, and a security team transported down to the planet's surface. They were met by Ben Miller and a group of nervous Vortigax officials. "Where is Ambassador Murphy?" Lavra asked immediately. Ben led them to a medical facility where Alan Murphy lay in a bed, surrounded by Vortigax doctors and their strange equipment. The ambassador was pale, but breathing. "He should be dead," one Vortigax doctor explained, its voice clicking rapidly in distress. The weapon destroyed 30% of his heart. "But something is keeping him alive." Hayes approached the bed and looked down at Murphy. "Death hasn't taken him because the covenant was broken at the moment of his near death. It's waiting to see what happens next." The lead Vortigax official, a replacement for First Speaker KZD, who had been removed from office after the attack, stepped forward. "What is happening to our people? The attackers are aging years every hour. Our scientists report strange energy readings throughout our system. Some say stars are dimming." Hayes turned to face the official. "Death is responding to the attack. Your people fired upon a cosmic force they don't understand." "We didn't know," the Vortigax protested. "Ignorance isn't an excuse," Hayes replied calmly. "But there may be a way to fix this." Lavra watched as Hayes removed a small wooden box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal what looked like ancient human bones, carved with symbols. "I need a quiet room," Hayes said. "I'm going to attempt communication." They were given a small chamber nearby. Hayes arranged the bone pieces in a pattern on the floor, then sat cross-legged before them. Lavra and the others watched from the edges of the room. Hayes began to speak in a language Lavra had never heard before. The air in the room grew cold, and shadows seemed to deepen in the corners. Then, like mist gathering into solid form, a figure appeared in the center of the bone pattern. It wore a dark cloak with a hood that obscured most of its face. What could be seen looked like an ancient human, with skin like old parchment and eyes that contained moving lights like distant stars. It spoke. The voice seemed to bypass their ears and appear directly in their minds. "John Hayes, you call upon me in a time of broken covenant." Hayes bowed his head. "Yes, Ancient One, I seek understanding and resolution." The figure turned slowly, seeming to observe everyone in the room. When its gaze passed over Lavra, she felt a strange sensation, as if her entire life was being measured in an instant. "The Vortigax have attacked a human under my protection," Death said. "Then they attacked me directly. This has never happened before." "They didn't understand," Hayes said. "They didn't know about our arrangement." "Ignorance does not change consequences." Death replied, "Balance must be restored." The Vortigax official had fallen to its knees, all four arms trembling. "Please," it begged, "what can we do to make this right?" Death turned toward the alien. "Your species once knew me. Long ago, your ancestors turned away, seeking technological immortality instead of accepting my role in the natural order. That was their choice. But attacking me was not a choice I will accept." Hayes leaned forward. "Ancient One, what if we found a new way? A new covenant that includes both humans and Vortigax?" The hooded figure was silent for a long moment. The lights in its eyes swirled faster. "There is a way," Death finally said, "but it requires a journey to my realm. Representatives of both species must come to the place beyond to understand what is at stake. Only then can a new covenant be formed." "I volunteer," Hayes said immediately. Death nodded slowly. "Prepare yourselves. The journey requires those who walk the line between life and death. Choose wisely who will come. The fate of both species depends on it." With those words, the figure dissolved back into shadow, leaving behind a deep chill in the room. Lavra looked at Hayes. "What does that mean? A journey to Death's realm?" Hayes stood up, carefully collecting the bone pieces. "It means we're going to have to die," at least temporarily. Outside the window, one of HFY's 3 suns suddenly dimmed, casting an eerie twilight across the planet. Time was running out. Panic spread across HFY as another sun dimmed in the sky. The Vortigax High Command declared a planet-wide emergency. In the main government building, Commander Laura West watched as Vortigax scientists scurried about, checking readings and speaking in rapid clicks to each other. "Our scientists detect strange quantum disturbances throughout our system," said Chief Scientist Zix, the young Vortigax who had spoken with Ambassador Murphy before the attack. "It's as if something is unraveling the very fabric of our reality." John Hayes nodded grimly. "Death's influence extends beyond physical bodies. It touches the cosmic balance itself." Lavra turned to Hayes. "You mentioned a journey to Death's realm. How exactly do we do that?" "The ancient texts in my family speak of a ritual," Hayes explained. "A way to enter a state between life and death, where consciousness can travel to the realm beyond while the body remains alive." Zix's compound eyes widened. "You're suggesting we die temporarily?" "Yes," Hayes said simply. "But we need the right team. People who understand what's at stake." Lavra didn't hesitate. "I'm going." Hayes nodded. "I expected nothing less. We'll need Vortigax representatives too." Chief Scientist Zix stepped forward. "I will go, and I believe I can convince 2 others who will understand the importance of this mission." The new first speaker of the Vortigax entered the room, its shell bearing the golden markings of high office. "This situation threatens our entire species. The attackers who fired upon the entity are now barely alive, aged beyond recognition. Strange hooded figures have been reported throughout our colonies." "The Reapers are collecting," Hayes said quietly. "Death has many forms, many manifestations. They're coming for those connected to the attack." "Then we must act quickly," the first speaker said. "What do you need for this ritual?" Hayes laid out his requirements. A quiet room with space for 7 beings to lie down, specific herbs and minerals from Earth that fortunately were stored on the U's Vanguard, and most importantly, medical equipment to monitor and potentially revive them if something went wrong. While preparations were made, Lavra contacted Admiral Garcia to explain the mission. His face on the screen showed deep concern. "This goes beyond anything in our protocols, Commander," he said. "But given the circumstances, you have full authorization. The fate of Earth-Vortigax relations may depend on this." "Understood, sir," Lavra replied. "If we don't return... Tell my family I was doing my duty." By evening, everything was ready. The team assembled in a circular chamber deep within the Vortigax medical facility. Lavra and Hayes were joined by Ben Miller, who had insisted on coming to represent Ambassador Murphy. From the Vortigax side, Chief Scientist Zix was accompanied by a military officer named Kraz, who had opposed Commander Vrax's extremist views, and a Vortigax spiritual leader called Elder Vox. "The ritual requires us to be on the edge of death, but not cross over completely," Hayes explained as everyone took their positions on specially prepared beds. "Our bodies will remain here, but our consciousness will travel to Death's realm." Lavra felt her heart racing as Vortigax medical technicians attached monitoring devices to her body. "What will it be like there?" Hayes looked at her with his tired eyes. "I don't know. No one who has gone has ever been able to fully describe it upon return. The human mind isn't built to comprehend it completely." The Vortigax Elder Vox clicked softly. "In our ancient texts, before we turned away from natural death, there were descriptions of a great library where all endings are recorded." Hayes looked surprised. "Our myths speak of something similar." The medical technicians finished their preparations. Each team member had been given a carefully measured substance that would slow their bodily functions to near death. "Remember," Hayes said, As they prepared to drink the mixture, stay together. Focus on my presence. I will be our anchor and guide. Laura took a deep breath and drank the bitter liquid. It burned going down, then spread a numbing cold throughout her body. Her vision began to blur, and the sounds of the room faded away. A moment, there was nothing but darkness. Then, like emerging from deep water, Laura felt herself rising into awareness again. But everything was different. She stood in a vast space that seemed both indoors and outdoors at once. Above was something, like a sky, but instead of blue, it was filled with swirling patterns of light and shadow. Around her stretched endless rows of what looked like tall shelves, each holding countless glowing objects. Hayes stood beside her, looking more solid and vibrant than he had in the physical world. One by one, the others appeared as well. Ben. Then the 3 Vortigax representatives. "We made it," Hayes whispered, his voice echoing strangely. "This is the edge of Death's domain." As they looked around in wonder, they noticed that each shelf contained what appeared to be small, glowing orbs. Inside each orb was what looked like a complete life, playing out from beginning to end. "The Library of Endings," Elder Vox said, in awe, just as our ancient texts described. Laura reached toward one of the orbs, but stopped before touching it. Inside, she could see what looked like a Vortigax life, from hatching to final moments. "Welcome, travelers." They turned to see the hooded figure of Death standing behind them. Here, in this realm, it appeared more solid, more real than it had in the physical world. Its face was still mostly hidden, but what could be seen looked ancient and wise. "You have come seeking understanding," Death said. "Follow me." They walked through the endless library, passing shelves that contained the lives of countless species from across the galaxy. Death explained as they walked. "This is where all endings are recorded and preserved. Each life, each consciousness, finds its way here when its physical form can no longer sustain it." "What happens to them after?" Laura asked. Death's hidden eyes turned toward her. "That is not for you to know yet. There are some mysteries that should remain so until your time comes naturally." They arrived at a section where the shells were different. The orbs here were brighter, more vibrant somehow. "These are human lives," Death said. "From the beginning of your species, I have guided and protected your souls." Hayes stepped forward. "Why? Why humans specifically?" "Because long ago, when consciousness first sparked in your ancestors, they did something no other species had done. They recognized me, accepted me, and made me part of their understanding of life. And that recognition was a covenant. I would guide and protect your souls if you would acknowledge my necessary role in the cycle." The Vortigax Elder Vox moved closer. "Our ancient texts speak of a time when we, too, had such an arrangement." Death nodded. "Yes, but your ancestors chose a different path. They sought to extend life indefinitely through technology, rejecting my role. That was their choice to make. And now?" Chief Scientist Zix asked, "What happens to our people now?" Death led them to another area, where strange, shadowy creatures moved between the shelves. They weren't reapers, but something else, entities that seemed hungry, predatory. "Without my protection," Death explained, "these entities would consume consciousness, preventing the natural cycle. Your attack on me through Ambassador Murphy broke an ancient balance. These entities sensed the disruption." Laura felt a chill as one of the shadow creatures turned toward their group, revealing nothing but darkness where a face should be. "Now you understand what is at stake," Death said. "The covenant must be restored, or the consequences will spread beyond just those who attacked me." Hayes stepped forward. "We want to propose a new covenant, one that includes both humans and Vortigax under your protection." Death was silent for a long moment. The lights within its eyes swirled and shifted. Such an arrangement would require sacrifice. Death finally said, "A bond must be sealed with something of value." "What kind of sacrifice?" Lavra asked. Death turned its hidden gaze upon her. "A willing soul to serve as intermediary between my realm and yours. A bridge between the living and the dead." Hayes straightened his shoulders. "I volunteer." Lavra started to protest, but Hayes raised his hand to stop her. "My family has served as liaisons to Death for generations," he said firmly. "This is my purpose." Death seemed to consider this. "Return to your bodies and prepare the ceremony of covenant. I will provide the terms. The willing intermediary will remain here until the covenant is sealed." Before anyone could respond, the realm around them began to fade. Lavra felt herself being pulled away, as if by a powerful current. The last thing she saw was Hayes standing beside Death, looking somehow at peace with his decision. Then darkness took her once more. Lavra gasped as she returned to her body. The cold feeling of the ritual substance was fading, replaced by a rush of warmth as her normal functions resumed. Around her, the others were also waking up, their monitoring devices beeping with increasing activity. All except one. John Hayes lay perfectly still, his chest barely moving, the monitors showing minimal life signs. "Is he ... Ben Miller began, his voice weak. "He's still alive," said one of the Vortigaux's medical technicians, "but just barely. His consciousness does not appear to have fully returned." Laura struggled to sit up. He volunteered to stay behind, to be the intermediary between our world and Death's realm. The three Vortigaux's representatives were regaining consciousness as well. Chief Scientist Zix was the first to speak. "What we saw. It changes everything we thought we knew about life and death." Elder Vox nodded, its compound eyes reflecting the dim light of the room. "Our ancestors turned away from death, seeking immortality through technology. But we never understood what we were also turning away from: protection." The door to the chamber slid open, and the first speaker entered, flanked by several high-ranking Vortigaux's officials. "You have returned," the first speaker observed. "Was your mission successful?" Lavra looked at Hayes's still form, then back to the first speaker. "Partially. We now understand what's happening and what needs to be done. Death has offered terms for a new covenant that would include both humans and Vortigaux's." Military Officer Kraz stepped forward. "First speaker, I have seen the entities that would consume our consciousness if Death does not protect us. The threat is real and immediate." The first speaker's antennae twitched with concern. "What are the terms of this covenant?" "Director Hayes has volunteered to remain as an intermediary between our worlds and Death's realm," Lavra explained. "But there's more. The Vortigaux's must publicly acknowledge Death's role in the natural order. Your people turned away from this understanding generations ago. And if we refuse?" asked one of the officials. The lights in the room flickered ominously. Outside, the last sun of HFY began to dim, casting the planet into an unnatural twilight. "I don't think refusal is an option," Lavra said quietly. The first speaker conferred with the officials in their clicking language. Finally, it turned back to the group. "We will accept these terms. The survival of our species is at stake." "Chief." Scientist Zix moved to stand beside Laura. "There's something else we learned in Death's realm. The Vortigaux's obsession with extended life has led to our cultural stagnation. We've become fearful of change, of risk. Perhaps embracing our mortality will help us live more fully, as humans do." Laura nodded. "Hayes said something similar once. He told me that humans accomplish so much because we know our time is limited." As they spoke, a change came over Hayes's body. His breathing became more regular, though his eyes remained closed. The monitors showed increasing brain activity. "Something's happening," Ben said, pointing to Hayes. Hayes's lips began to move, though his eyes stayed closed. When he spoke, his voice had an echo to it, as if coming from both him and somewhere far away. "The terms of the covenant are as follows," Hayes said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of death speaking through him. "The Vortigax will acknowledge mortality as the natural end of physical life. They will recognize my role as guide and protector of consciousness beyond physical death. In return, I will extend my protection to all Vortigax souls, guiding them safely to what comes after." The first speaker stepped forward. "We accept these terms. How do we formalize this covenant?" Hayes's body sat up, though his eyes remained closed. "A ceremony must be performed on your world, visible to all your people. A covenant must be acknowledged publicly and recorded for future generations." "And what of Ambassador Murphy?" Laura asked. "Will he recover?" Hayes turned his unseeing face toward her. "The diplomat was caught between life and death when the covenant was broken. He will recover once balance is restored." The preparations for the ceremony took 3 days. The Vortigax government broadcast the news throughout their 12-system hegemony. Massive Reaper manifestations had appeared near major population centers across Vortigax space, visible to all, a clear sign that death was watching and waiting. On the morning of the ceremony, Ambassador Alan Murphy finally opened his eyes. He was weak but alert, with no memory of what had happened after he was shot. "How am I still alive?" he asked Lavra when she visited his recovery room. "That weapon should have killed me instantly." "It's a long story," Lavra said with a small smile, "but the short version is that you got caught in the middle of a cosmic dispute. And because of that, we may have just achieved peace with the Vortigax in a way no one could have imagined." The ceremony took place in the Grand Plaza of the Vortigax capital city. Thousands of Vortigax gathered, with millions more watching the broadcast across their territories. The first speaker stood on a raised platform, flanked by the High Command and government officials. Lavra, Ben, and a recovering Ambassador Murphy represented Earth. John Hayes's body stood at the center of the platform, still serving as vessel for death's presence. Around the plaza, shadowy Reaper figures had appeared, standing silent and watchful. The first speaker addressed the crowd. "Today, we acknowledge a truth our ancestors turned away from. We recognize that physical life is finite, and that the entity humans call death is not our enemy, but the natural guardian of what comes after." As the first speaker spoke, the skies of HFY began to lighten. The 3 suns, which had been dimmed, gradually returned to their normal brightness. Hayes's body raised its arms, and when he spoke, the voice that came forth echoed across the plaza without need for amplification. "The covenant is accepted. The balance is restored. From this day forward, all Vortigax souls will be under my protection, as human souls have been since the dawn of their consciousness." A wave of energy pulsed outward from Hayes, visible as a ripple in the air that spread across the plaza, and beyond, the Vortigax in the crowd felt something change within them, a recognition of something their species had denied for generations. Lara watched as the hooded Reaper figures around the plaza bowed their heads in acknowledgement, then faded from view. The terms had been accepted. The covenant-sealed. Ambassador Murphy stepped forward, still weak but determined to fulfill his diplomatic role. He extended his hand to the first speaker. "It seems our peoples have found common ground after all," Murphy said. "Not in technology or resources, but in our shared mortality and what lies beyond." The first speaker extended an upper limb, grasping Murphy's hand in the human gesture of agreement. "A new era begins for the Vortigax. We have much to learn from humans about living fully within the bounds of a finite life." As the ceremony concluded, Hayes's body collapsed. Lavra rushed to his side, checking for vital signs. For several terrifying seconds, there was nothing. Then suddenly, Hayes gasped and opened his eyes. Did it work? He asked, his voice now entirely his own. Lavra helped him sit up. Yes, the covenant is sealed. But what about you? Death said, you would remain in its realm. Hayes looked confused, and understanding dawned on his face. Not my physical form. Only a part of my consciousness will serve as the bridge. I am forever changed, but I can still exist in this world. As Hayes spoke, Laura noticed something different about his eyes. Within them, like distant stars in a night sky, tiny points of light now swirled and moved. Hayes had returned, but he was no longer entirely human. He had become something new, a living bridge between the world of the living and the realm of death. And the universe would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the ceremony on HFY. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. News of humanity's relationship with death and the new covenant with the Eye, Vortigax, had spread to every corner of known space. Ambassador Alan Murphy stood at the viewing window of the UES Vanguard, watching as the ship approached Earth. After months of diplomatic work on HFY, he was finally going home. His chest still bore a scar from the weapon that should have killed him, a constant reminder of how close he had come to death. Quite a view, isn't it? Commander Lavra West said, joining him at the window. Murphy nodded. I never thought I'd be coming home after negotiating peace terms with both the Vortigax and death itself. Lavra smiled. The galaxy is a strange place. Just when we think we understand it, something new surprises us. The door to the observation deck slid open, and John Hayes entered. In the months since the ceremony, Hayes had changed even more. His hair had turned completely white, and the starry lights in his eyes were now visible even to those who weren't near death. As death's intermediary, he existed in both worlds at once. Earth is preparing a formal reception for us, Hayes said. The Galactic Council has sent representatives as well. They're calling it the most significant diplomatic achievement in centuries. Murphy raised an eyebrow. All because someone tried to kill me. Sometimes the worst actions lead to the best outcomes, Hayes replied. The Vortigax are transformed. Their entire society is changing. This was true. Since acknowledging death's role in the natural order, the Vortigax had begun to shift their priorities. Their obsession with extending life through technology had been replaced with a focus on living well within their natural lifespan. Art, music, and philosophy were flourishing across their territories in ways not seen for thousands of years. Chief Scientist Zix sent a message, Lavra said. Their first cultural exchange ships will arrive at Earth next month. They're particularly interested in human art that explores themes of mortality. Murphy nodded. And what about the other species? I've heard some are reconsidering their own relationship with death. Hayes's eyes swirled with starlight as he spoke. 7 species have already approached me about establishing their own covenants. Death is ... considering their requests. Lavra still found it strange to hear Hayes speak of death as if discussing a colleague. Do you think other species will be accepted under death's protection? Some will, Hayes said. Others may not. Death has its own criteria that even I don't fully understand. But the fact that they're asking shows how much has changed. The ship's AI announced their approach to Earth's orbital stations. The 3 of them made their way to the shuttle bay for the final leg of their journey home. On Earth, crowds had gathered to welcome the returning diplomats. The attempted assassination of Ambassador Murphy, once a potential trigger for war, had instead led to the strongest peace agreement in human history. The Vortigax hegemony and the United Systems of Earth were now not just allies but bound together by a cosmic understanding that transcended politics. As Murphy, Lavra, and Hayes stepped off the shuttle, they were greeted by Admiral Garcia and other high-ranking officials. "Well done, all of you," the Admiral said, shaking their hands. "You've achieved what generations of diplomats could not." Hayes looked past the Admiral to the edge of the landing area, where a hooded figure stood, visible only to him. Death had come to witness this moment as well. The reception moved to a grand hall where representatives from a dozen species had gathered. Murphy gave a speech about the new era of understanding between humans and Vortigax. When he finished, a surprise guest took the stage, the first speaker of the Vortigax, who had traveled to Earth specifically for this occasion. 6 months ago, our people viewed humans as inferior because of your shorter lives, the first speaker said, its voice translated smoothly for the human audience. "We now understand that your awareness of mortality is not a weakness, but a strength. It drives you to create, to connect, to live fully in the time you have." The first speaker turned to look directly at Hayes. "We also acknowledge the debt we owe to Director Hayes, who bridges our world and the realm beyond. Through him, we have begun to understand mysteries our ancestors turned away from." Hayes nodded in acknowledgement, aware of the weight of his unique position. Since becoming Death's intermediary, he had guided hundreds of souls, both human and Vortigax, helping them understand what waited beyond physical life. After the formal reception, Murphy and Lavra found a quiet moment away from the crowds. "What happens now?" Lavra asked. "We've made peace with an alien species and with death itself. What could possibly come next?" Murphy smiled. "We keep exploring. The galaxy is full of mysteries we've barely begun to understand." "Speaking of mysteries," Lavra said, "have you heard what's happening on the Vortigax homeworld? The ceremony they performed wasn't just symbolic. They've started including acknowledgement of mortality in their birth rituals." Murphy nodded. "Hayes told me. When a Vortigax child hatches, the parents now whisper to it about the natural cycle of life and death. They believe it helps the new consciousness connect to both worlds from the beginning." "It's beautiful, in a way," Lavra said, acknowledging the end as part of celebrating a beginning. As evening fell, Hayes walked alone in a garden outside the reception hall. Death appeared beside him, visible only to his eyes. "The covenant is spreading," Death said, its voice a whisper in Hayes's mind. "Other species begin to remember what they once knew. Is that what you wanted all along?" Hayes asked. Death's hood shifted slightly, revealing more of its ancient face. "What I want is balance. For eons, consciousness has feared me, fled from me, tried to defeat me. They never understood that I am not their enemy." Hayes looked up at the stars. "And now? Now there is a beginning," Death said. "A recognition that I am not the end of existence, merely a transition. A doorway. A doorway to what?" Hayes asked, though he already knew the answer. "That remains the greatest mystery," Death replied. "One that each consciousness must discover when it's time." Comes. In the months and years that followed, the new understanding spread throughout the galaxy. Human diplomats, with their unique perspective on mortality, became highly valued mediators between species. The Vortigax, once feared as aggressive expansionists, transformed into thoughtful philosophers and artists, sharing their new wisdom with other civilizations. And on countless worlds, beings of all kinds began to see the hooded figures not as harbingers of doom, but as silent guardians ensuring safe passage to whatever came next, all because someone attacked a human diplomat and accidentally declared war on death itself, not in the vast library beyond physical reality. Death added a new shelf of glowing orbs. These contained not individual lives, but the story of how two species found common ground in their shared mortality. It was, Death reflected, one of the more interesting chapters in the long history of consciousness, and the story was still being written.